our 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers insider, Michael Kaskey-Blomain. You can follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB. Mike, how you doing on this beautiful Saturday?
Josh, I'm doing pretty well, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. My head's spinning with all the situation with Kawhi Leonard, so let's hit on that first. You know, when this first story came down, I was on the air filling in for Rich Quinones yesterday, and my first reaction, Mike, was, look, he may prefer to go to Los Angeles, but it doesn't matter if you're a Sixers fan or not. We all know that the Spurs are going to do what's best for their organization. They're not just going to hand Kawhi over to a Los Angeles team to do him a favor. And if the Sixers can offer a better deal than the Lakers or the Clippers, you have to think the Spurs are not going to trade him to the Lakers Clippers. If the better deal is the Sixers, they're going to send him to Philly.
Yeah, I have to agree there, Josh. Like you said, just because Kawhi wants to go somewhere in particular, the Spurs have to be looking out for their best interest in this situation, which would mean getting back the most that they can for, a player that's one of the top 5 in the NBA. And it's, something to consider with the Lakers being in the Western Conference. Also, it's something to consider whether they would be, even interested in trading him within the conference, or would they rather trade him to the East. But it's a situation where they're really not in any rush. If they want to move him, they could technically hold on to him all the way up until the trade deadline in February and, assess the market at that point. They're not in a situation, and I think they don't want to find themselves in a situation similar to what Cleveland did almost last summer, where Kyrie requested a trade, and the team didn't have to trade him. He was under contract for 2 more years. They ended up trading him to a rival for pennies on the dollar, and the team kind of fell apart. I don't think the Spurs are trying to go down a similar path.
To me, the Sixers acquiring Kawhi would be huge. And I'm not trying to diminish LeBron, but Kawhi is an NBA Defensive Player of the Year. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid were 2 of the top 12 players in defensive rating in the NBA. The Sixers could become a defensive juggernaut, and similar to how the Warriors turned the league on its head with offense, the Sixers could turn the league on its head with defense, Mike.
Absolutely, Josh. And if we're speaking strictly basketball sense, I would take LeBron James on any team that I have any day of the week. I'm not saying that, but when we're talking strictly basketball, Kawhi might be a better fit on the current Sixers than LeBron would be anyway, because he could play off ball. He wouldn't need the ball as much. And then, like you said, him combined with Ben, Joel in the paint, that would be, a nightmare matchup on the defensive end. And their ability to switch on almost everything with the size and length that they would have in that front court would just be, it would be extremely difficult for other offenses to contend with. So when we're talking strictly basketball, I mean, Kawhi would fit, almost as good as anyone in the entire league on the perimeter in Philadelphia.
When you think of the Sixers, you look at what they would have to give up. Obviously, they have to give up at least a 10th overall pick. Because of the other teams that are in contention, Mike, I'm assuming they might have to give up the 26th overall as well. I'm figuring it's probably going to be a combination of Fultz and Covington for Kawhi. So is that a deal that you feel like I would do that deal in a heartbeat? Or is there any hesitation on your part to give up all 4 of those assets?
You know what, Josh? The only hesitation on my part comes with Kawhi's current contract. I obviously personally don't know what Kawhi is thinking long term. I feel like a lot of people around the league might not necessarily know exactly what he's thinking. And with him eligible to hit free agency again next summer, I would be a little bit hesitant to offer, especially a young guy like Markelle or a guy like Dario or the 10th pick for a guy that could potentially bolt next summer. Now, if he talked to Brett Brown and gave some sort of reassurance that he was interested in re-upping in Philly, being here long term, that's a different situation. But I think, especially in the Sixers side of things, when you're already a team that's in position to make great strides this year, regardless of if you add a superstar talent, I think I would be a little hesitant to really tinker with some of these core pieces too much without knowing that Kawhi would be here for longer than a single season.
Brett Brown is an interesting part of this whole equation because he was the guy in San Antonio that helped develop Kawhi into the superstar that he became. When Kawhi came out of Oklahoma State, he was not the player that he is looked at as now. He was not an outside shooter. He was not a guy with a great offensive game. He was basically just a defensive force at Oklahoma State, and it was under Brett Brown that Kawhi became this better player and this more developed superstar. How much do you think the relationship Brett has a history with Kawhi could factor into, if he came to Philadelphia, being a part of keeping him in Philadelphia?
I think it could actually play a pretty big factor into that situation, Josh. That's a great point. I think that's something, I'm sure people have noted, but I feel like it might be flying under the radar a little bit. I mean, like you said, Kawhi took huge leaps in his development under Brett Brown, which is something that, Brown really specialized in San Antonio with a lot of those guys. But like you said, Kawhi specifically was the guy that was kind of unheralded coming out of college. Was probably projected to be a rotation player, a role player, certainly not a potential MVP, top 5 player. And a lot of his development, like you said, especially on the offensive end, his, the growth of his shot, his, ability to take the ball to the basket. I think a lot of that really flourished under Brett. They had, a pair of seasons together. And I think, it certainly wouldn't, I don't think necessarily sway Kawhi's decision one way or another. But if he's already considering the Sixers based off, the money available or the core, the guys that he'd potentially play with, if you add then a coach that he's familiar with, has a history with, and likes, I think that could potentially tip the scale in the Sixers' favor.
When you look at all the different potential scenarios for Kawhi, I just feel like if I'm the Sixers, I can offer a better deal than the Lakers, that I can offer a comparable or better deal than the Clippers. Mike, the two Kawhi rumors that bother me the most if I'm a Sixers fan, that worry me, are the report that came out from Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer, that the Suns would be willing to offer the first overall pick and players for Kawhi. That deal obviously is eye-opening, if that's even true. And then also Jackie McMullen's reporting, because she covers the Celtics, that the Celtics would consider trading Kyrie to San Antonio for Kawhi. Those are really the only deals that I look at that could potentially one-up the Sixers.
Yeah, and if you're a team like the Suns, I think they're in a little bit more of a position to gamble, I guess, with their assets than the Sixers are. I feel like, the Sixers have kind of already established themselves as this young up-and-coming team with these assets they have in place. So I think they need to be a little bit more sure when they're going to make a move, where opposed to the Suns, who is a team that's really not been able to show the progress that the Sixers have over the recent years in their rebuild. They're still kind of trying to get that, that foundation in place to build on. I think they have a little bit more, I guess, leeway, you could say, in terms of what they're willing to offer for a guy like Kawhi, especially, without the guarantee that he'd be back. And I could definitely see the Celtics moving Kyrie. I mean, he's only been there for one season. He's already said that he plans to ride out his contract, not sign an extension, and hit free agency next summer. They showed that they could be a really formidable team without him. They were one game away from the finals with him on the, him riding the bench. So I think that him getting traded for Kawhi is it's definitely a potential situation. I feel like in the Celtics case, they don't have necessarily a ton to lose without knowing that Kyrie's even going to be back. So, I mean, I think there will be a lot of, solid offers for Kawhi out there for the Sixers to contend with. But if they really, I think if the Sixers really set their mind to the fact that they want Kawhi, if this is what Brett Brown thinks will be, the kind of the final piece to put this team into true contention. And like I said, if they can have some sort of assurance that, he'll probably want to stay past the single season, I think that the Sixers could, put together maybe not the best potential package, but certainly one of the most ones that would be intriguing to San Antonio.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain joining us here on the Pro Wakanda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB for all your Sixers coverage throughout the year. And, of course, he will be at the NBA Draft again this year, covering it live on location for us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Mike, let's transition to something that is more tangible, which is the Sixers still own the 10th overall pick, and they have brought in a litany of guys, but there's a common thread with all this, Mike. Miles Bridges, Mikal Bridges, Zaire Smith, Lonnie Walker, Kevin Knox, Bruce Brown Jr. These guys all have a specific thing in common. They're all wing players. It's almost like the Sixers are telegraphing, not just to us who are following a team, but to the whole world, that, look, this is what we're focused on. This is what we need to improve on for this team.
Yeah, I think it is, Josh. It's pretty, like you said, it is telegraphing, I think, but it's pretty clear at this point in time exactly what areas the team needs to address, whether that be, through this draft or through free agency. They have, obviously, the center position of the future tied down in Joel, the point guard position tied down in Ben. They have some shooters in place, but they really, and it's something that they've needed, going back to the beginning of this rebuild, a perimeter player that can create his own offense, not just a guy that can catch and shoot, but a guy that you can kick the ball out to and is able to put it on the floor, take a guy off the dribble, hit a pull-up, just create his own offense from the wing. I think that's something that they're looking to address both through the draft, like you said, but the common theme of all these guys they're working out, Bridges, Knox, Bruce Bowen Jr., all these guys, like you said, they have the size, the length, and the switchability to play on the perimeter in today's NBA. I think that combined with the backup big guy, I think that's something that they're looking to address this year too. Obviously, Amir Johnson is probably going to walk in free agency. Rashawn Holmes will be back, but he hasn't necessarily, proven that he can be that number 2 guy behind Joel. So I think between, a perimeter player and a backup big guy, those will really be the 2 targets. And, depending on what they do with this pick in the draft, whether or not they hold on to it, if they decide to move it, I think if they hold on to it, there's really talent at that 10 spot that they could get a guy that could really plug in and be what they're looking for on the wing, whether that would be, Miles Bridges, McCall Bridges, Knox, one of those guys. I think there's a good chance that, they get a guy that's going to be a legit piece of the rotation moving forward in this draft.
Who is a guy at 10 that is there a guy or two that you look at 10? Obviously, they've had all these guys come in this week. But when you look at guys' film, when you look at this team that you say, there's 1 or 2 guys that you think are the best fit for the Sixers at 10?
Well, I know Mike Gill is going to be happy about my answer right here, but I'm pretty big into Kevin Knox. I think his versatility in today's NBA, the way he can kind of play a couple both forward positions for this team, stretch the floor a little bit, be physical, I think he would really probably be my top choice. Obviously, some of the other names that are getting tossed around, are worth taking a look at. Michael Porter, obviously, with the back injury, is, talent-wise, I think would be a perfect fit on the Sixers team. There's obviously red flags concern about his health moving forward, but his ability to, exactly what we were saying before, kind of create his own offense from the perimeter, I think would fit in. But, any of those guys really, Lonnie Walker, another guy that you mentioned coming out of Miami, with his, his size at the shooting guard spot, ability to shoot. So there's not, heading into this draft at the 10 spot, there's not one particular player, maybe like there has been in past drafts, at least for me personally, whereas this is the guy I think they need to target in on. For me, it's more, like you said, it's just a skill set that they need to address. And I think that if they get one of these guys that's a legitimate 2-way perimeter wing player, regardless of specifically who it is, I think that would be a pick well spent.
Yeah, speaking of past drafts, Mike, you were at the past couple of drafts when the Sixers had the number 1 overall pick. And obviously being 10 instead of number 1 is a totally different vibe around this team. At 10, there's a lot more uncertainty, right? There's a lot more what-ifs depending on who moves up and down around the Sixers, or if the Sixers even trade that pick. So, for you covering this on Thursday night, how do you foresee how this is going to play out? Because, again, you're not at number 1. You're sitting there at 10 waiting for everybody else ahead of you to actually make action, and then you see what comes down to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. I think there's more possibility in this draft than there has been in the recent years in terms of there's, potential for a lot of different things to happen. When they had the first pick in 2016, it wasn't going to get traded. It was going to be Ben Simmons. They had the 3rd pick last year. They moved up. They knew, it was well known that Fultz was going to be that target going into the draft. There was not a lot of talk in 2015 about moving out of that 3rd spot, which, ended up being the Okafor pick. This year, I think it's completely different. Everything I've heard from the team, they're considering all options. There was a report that they want to move into the top 5 for, an unnamed target, a guy that they apparently like a lot that is projected to go in the top 5. There's been rumors and reports that they would, obviously consider moving this pick if in a potential, a trade for someone like Kawhi or another sort of move like that. So I think this year specifically in Brooklyn on Thursday, it's going to be the most potential, movement and a lot of different rumors and potential, changes coming in this draft compared to recent years where it was more not necessarily set in stone, but more so clear what the organization was going to do. I think this year is such a swing summer. There's so many different things that could happen. And, the fact that this Kawhi news broke a week before the draft, obviously the Sixers are going to be, in contact with the Spurs over the next 6 days. And I honestly don't know, it could go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if they keep the pick and make the pick at 10 and pick, a Miles Bridges or a Knox. I wouldn't be surprised if they package that pick with maybe the 26th pick and something else to try to move back up. And I wouldn't be surprised if, that they were involved in some trade talks on Thursday leading up to the draft. So I think this has a lot of potential ways this draft could go, more so than the past few over the recent years.
We've mentioned Robert Covington a couple times. I really do think there's a possibility he could be traded, whether it's this offseason or before the trade deadline, because he has a very friendly contract. People forget that his contract was heavily front-loaded, and that salary decreases each year for the rest of the deal. And look, if the Sixers can use him to upgrade their team, yeah, you're losing a guy who's first-team All-NBA defense, but if you can make the team better, why not do so? And with a guy who other teams may say, hey, that contract is attractive for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. I do agree that I think, if a trade is made, Robert's likely to be included in it. And I've been, I'm a big Robert Covington fan since the beginning. I think, obviously, he deserved that contract. I was happy to see him make first-team All-Defense. But they're looking for an upgrade on the perimeter, on the offensive end. You can't get too much better on the defensive end than Robert. But if you look at a guy like Kawhi, a guy like Paul George, just to throw out another free agent name, they're basically better versions of Robert Covington. They're just very similar players, but what he does, they just do better. They're better on the offensive end, a little bit better defensively. So if the Sixers are looking to add a player like that, especially, let's say, Kawhi, the Spurs are probably definitely going to ask for a guy like Robert Covington back for, A, the contract factor, like you mentioned. He's on a very team-friendly contract, especially for his production, and B, his skill set. I mean, if they're going to lose a guy like Kawhi, they'd probably like to get a similar type player back, a proven defender and a guy that's, a solid contributor in a rotation. So I do agree that, considering that the Sixers want to upgrade the perimeter, which is, where Covington resides, I think there's a good chance that he could be, a casualty in a move this summer to make improvement for the team. That's not a slight on him. If anything, I think his, the fact that he has elevated his value across the league is it's obviously a good thing for him, and it's a good thing for the Sixers. A couple years ago, I don't think Robert Covington would have, really turned many heads in a trade talk, but now I think he could be used as a legitimate piece if you're talking about a trade for Kawhi or another potential move. So I do agree. I think there's a pretty high probability that if the team gets involved in a trade this summer, Bobby Buckets could be gone.
Is Markelle Fultz going to play in the Summer League?
They have been very tight-lipped about that, Josh. I have a feeling, just completely personal feeling, that he is not going to play. They've said that they're going to wait until after the draft, and the official roster for Summer League will come out sometime probably at the beginning of July. They've been tight-lipped about it. He's been putting in work. He was asked about it at the exit interviews in May. He said he was up to the team. He said if they wanted him to play, they thought it was the best thing for him, he would do it, but he didn't necessarily seem like he was, wanting to do it for himself. So I could see a situation where they want him just in the gym away from public until training camp starts, and then, hopefully he's ready to go.
See, to me, Mike, real quick, I feel like there's value in him getting out there in the Summer League because of the fact that you can never undervalue reps. The repetitions of getting out there, getting some work in, getting some hands-on the court. He's barely been on the court for the last year and a half, and it won't hurt them. Even if he's only out there for 4 or 5 games, it's just getting the sweat, getting the action in, feeling the movement, and that way when you get to training camp, at least he has been running with guys of at least equivalent talent. Not equal talent because he's such a talented guy, but equivalent basketball environment.
Yeah, I agree with that, Josh. And not to mention the confidence factor. Getting him to get the reps physically is a great thing. And I think getting him out on the floor against some guys like you kind of just said, they're obviously not the all-stars of the NBA, but some of his peers that he could probably, play well against, perform well against, just like he did in Summer League last year. He looked great. He looked confident. I think getting him back out in that situation where he can kind of, maybe shine a little bit, show off some of his skill set against, a talent pool that's somewhat watered down before he's thrown back into the fire against, starting NBA point guards and 2 guards. I do think it would be a wise move, even if it was just for a couple games to, like you said, keep him in the rhythm, get him out there. I think it would be beneficial both physically and mentally for him. So I personally do hope he plays. I think it would be beneficial. Obviously his shot would be extremely critiqued. Everyone would be hanging on every shot, but that's going to happen one way or another, whether that's in the summer
Right,
league,
he's gonna have eyes on him, whether it's in summer league or in training camp or in the first preseason game, or if he shows up anywhere and a TMZ camera chases him down. People are gonna be on him no matter what.
Right, so it might be smart to kind of get that, the initial like the eyes out of the way in summer league. I really don't see a negative to him playing in summer league. I could just see a situation where the team, decides to hold him out. But I guess that's something we'll have to wait and see in the next couple of weeks.
Final one for you, Mike, and I appreciate your time here on a Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. Michael Kaskey-Blomain joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. You can follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB for all your Sixers coverage year-round. Mike, so what do you think is going to happen with the GM? We've heard all kinds of rumors of who could or couldn't be the GM, but what kind of timetable are we looking at? Are we going to have a general manager in place at least for the start of the offseason before July 1st?
I don't think so, Josh. I do not think that we will have a free agency, a GM in place by free agency. It seems like, everything from what I've heard, the team is taking their time. They're casting a really large net, a lot of potential targets and candidates, kind of the opposite of the last time they did the search with, and ended up with Brian. And I just think that there's extreme confidence in Brett Brown within the organization to be, the guy that's the face, the front and center of the organization this summer. I think that they're confident with him being the guy that goes into the free agency meetings. They're confident with him being the guy that pitches the future of the team, because who better to kind of lay out the groundwork and what the team's going to be looking to do than the guy that's going to be, in charge of it on the sideline. He's well respected, especially in a situation, you look at potentially a Kawhi trade. I mean, who else would the Sixers rather have in a room with Kawhi and his people than Brett Brown? And I think that's just the attitude that the organization has. And I think, Brett luckily is buying them some time. I think that because of how confident they are in him, they have a little bit of leeway in the search that they can, take their time and not rush it.
Very interesting. All right, Mike, appreciate your time on a Saturday. Again, follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB for all your Sixers coverage, and Mike will be at the NBA draft this Thursday. Of course, you'll hear all the coverage right here on 97.3 ESPN. Mike, have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll be checking in with you, I'm sure, during the Sports Bash on the night of the draft.
Thanks, Josh. You too, man. Great talking to you.